What exactly are we paying for? I didn't think this would be the biggest difference between first and third-party lenses. For years, there weren't any Nikon Z-mount lenses with aperture rings, but all of a sudden there's now two. In the past week, TTArtisan and TTArtisan released autofocusing 85 and 75mm options, but the aperture rings not all they have in common. They share 6 other similarities and 6 key differences, but at a fraction of the price of Nikon's 85mm, which corners were cut? Are TTArtisan's or TTArtisan serious contenders? Hello, I'm Jack, this is Bokeh Therapy, and just like you, I take lenses seriously. Months of research to find the best version of everything so that every shot can be pixel peeped to oblivion. For an enthusiast, I take photography a little too seriously, which is not at all Saul Leiter's style. He was light, casual, in no great hurry, and rather than try to imitate his abstract look using these 3 telephoto primes, what I really wanted to copy was his approach. The TTArtisan's lens was sent to me by Bokeh. They're not sponsoring the video, have no input into its production, and as always, I have final edit. Similarity 6 between these two lenses is their filter size. They both share 62mm front filters, but difference 6 is their weight. The TTArtisan's 85 weighs 452 grams, about the same footprint as Nikon's 85mm f1.8s prime at 470 grams, and both of these lenses are heavier than the TTArtisan at 344 grams. And that's despite the fact TTArtisan uses an all-metal lens barrel, whereas TTArtisans and Nikon use a combination of plastic and metal on the outside. So that weight is coming from the extra glass inside, which should in theory improve image quality. With the grip on the ZF though, both TTArtisans and TTArtisan handle very well. Difference 5 between the two lenses is how they handle physical controls. The aperture ring on the TTArtisan is clicked in third stop increments, whereas the TTArtisan's is completely unclicked. There's a slight detent on the TTArtisans when moving from f16 to A. I didn't bump it too much when I was shooting, but unclicked is better than no aperture ring at all compared to the Nikon 85. TTArtisans also has a custom function button and an AF to MF switch. Nikon has the switch, but not the button. TTArtisan has neither. In terms of physical controls, TTArtisans is the more serious option. Saul Leiter didn't take his personal work too seriously. A fashion photographer by trade for Elle and Vogue, he naturally had to shoot in color, but Leiter wasn't trying to be a pioneer. On the streets, he chose color over black and white because it's what he shot at work. He chose compression and abstraction through longer focal lengths over disruption and confrontation. Because he wanted tranquility on his daily photo walks, no one, not even Leiter himself, could have predicted what came next. Difference 4 between these two lenses is how dampened the focus ring is. TTArtisan's focus ring has a nice amount of dampening, but TTArtisan's has the most dampened focus ring I've ever tried on any lens. I'm not sure if it's a good thing, but it takes multiple turns to go from close focus to infinity. Similarity 5 is these two lenses' close focus distance, 0.8 meters for the TTArtisan's, 0.75 meters for the TTArtisan, about the same for the Nikon 85. These are practically identical working distances, and when you rack focus from close focus to infinity, both lenses have focus breathing. TTArtisan has less of it, so it might be better optimized for video than TTArtisan, but both are decent options for hybrid shooting, just like the Nikon 85 because of similarity 4, autofocus. They perform about the same, a little jumpy 3D tracking when shooting wide open, but sticky enough considering the thinner depth of field for telephoto primes. I didn't notice much focusing noise in these lenses either. There's a bit of it, but TTArtisan and TTArtisan both use STM motors. I have to reevaluate the value proposition for first-party offerings. What exactly are we paying for? Leiter's personal work didn't pay for any bills. It was just an outlet to escape from big city anxieties. But the critical acclaim he wasn't seeking eventually came his way. Saul's first photo book, Early Color, was finally published in 2006. Next came the speaking tour, then a documentary. And after watching all of his interviews back to back, it's clear that Leiter's not a tortured artist. The fact he didn't take it seriously may have been the key to his success. A slow burn eventually spread into wildfire. Similarity 3 between these two lenses appears when you go out of focus. CA or loca. Neither lens has any obvious chromatic aberration, even wide open backlit, very minimal fringing, if any fringing when you zoom into 200%. I always thought this was the hardest thing to control for in lens design and the reason I tend to buy first party optics, but when two third party lenses from different manufacturers can both control for CA so well at such a low price, if it's on the autofocus speed or how controlled the aberrations are, what exactly are we paying for? Bright daylight under the Australian sun reveals difference 3 between these optics, bokeh and rendering. Yes, 85 does give more compression and isolation at f1.8 than 75mm at f2. The 75mm has vintage swirl, bubbly bokeh around the center of the frame. It doesn't mean the TTArtisan is reserved for niche use cases only. It's not just a character lens, but the 85mm does have a more modern look. It's a more modern clinical rendering, closer to that of Nikon's 85mm f1.8s. This does also mean you lose that dreamy swirly bokeh of the TTArtisan, but everything's a trade-off. Similarity too between these two lenses starts to shed some light on what the most expensive parts of lens design must be, because neither the 7Artisans or TTArtisan lenses are weather sealed. There's no rubber gaskets at the lens mount. If a company claims weather sealing, even if there's not an IP rating, you need to test against dust and moisture, and the cost of those processes start adding up. Viltrox's Pro lens lineup is the first of the Chinese manufacturers to claim weather resistance that I've seen, and they cost double the price of the 7Artisans. Nikon's 85 is almost triple the price, although it is thoroughly weather sealed throughout. Is weather sealing enough to justify the price difference? Too comes down to the look. I'd say 7Artisans went for a more contemporary look. The font and details of the focus and aperture rings are minimal and modern, while TTArtisan went for a more retro font and distinctive grooves along its rings. Neither lens is the prettiest on the ZF, but TTArtisan does look more retro for what it's worth. It's superficial, I know. Pros don't care about how a camera looks, but catering for enthusiasts versus pros shouldn't be a zero-sum game. The 7Artisan's 85mm looks more at home on the Z6 III, whereas TTArtisan looks the retro part the most on the ZF. It's a fun and casual combination. What would have happened if Soullighter didn't shoot for fun? It would have been much easier to be taken seriously shooting black and white. Like his NYC contemporaries Robert Frank, William Klein, he may have switched to wider lenses to shoot up close. That will earn him the documentarian bona fides quicker rather than be tarred by the whimsy of surrealists. If Lighter was shooting for others' approval, his work may have been lost. Early color would have never come to light. Harsh lighting highlights similarity 1 shared by these lenses, but it's not one you want. Both have flaring, unnatural veiling and ghosting, especially prominent at night. I'd say it's a little better controlled on the 7Artisans than the TTArtisan, but still there. Both lenses come with included lens hoods, although it doesn't entirely fix the aggressive flaring, while the Nikon 85, even without a lens hood, handles these flares with grace. I didn't think this would be the biggest difference between first and third party lenses, but lens coatings must be more expensive than we know. Thankfully, not many people shoot this late into the night, and even during the day in backlit scenarios, the flare was mostly a non-issue, which just leaves one last difference between these two lenses. Difference 1. Sharpness. TTArtisan's 75mm is sharp enough in the center for my street work. A bit more vignetting and softer corners tends to draw you into the subject for portraits anyway. But 7Artisans is sharper across the frame. It's sharper in the center, not as sharp as the Nikon 85, but this level of sharpness continues through to the corners. It doesn't taper off as much as the TTArtisan 75, and you don't lose much contrast or detail to the edges of the frame. They're sharp enough for most telephoto use cases, but if you want serious performance and have the budget, it's hard to beat the Nikon 85mm, but at less than half the price. The 7Artisans comes really close, but if like me, you're shooting the ZF for fun, and ultimate IQ isn't your priority, the TTArtisan's 75mm with its more vintage rendering is still a great pick. I want my work more and more to be fun and spontaneous, and the ZF's a constant reminder to not take myself too seriously. Why did I start shooting in the first place? It's my bokeh therapy.